Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Here we are at the end of all things, the final video in my 5-part series charting my top 50 games. This is the point where I state the bleeding obvious because people who watch my channel can probably guess almost every game in this top 10. They may not get them in the right order, but there's a good chance they will get them. Before we begin, I will point out that if you missed any of the previous videos in the series, there are links in the video description below. If you've already caught up, let's get this done. Number 10, Rangers of Shadowdeep. This is surely no surprise to anyone. I love Rangers of Shadowdeep. It's a hybrid tabletop skirmish RPG game built from the ground up as a cooperative or solo experience, which means it's basically custom made for someone like me who enjoys miniature skirmish games and role-playing games and spends a fair amount of time playing games solo. The storyline of the game is pretty bare bones. There is an evil spreading across the land. Rangers go out with teams of helpers to investigate and fight back the darkness. But that threadbare narrative actually plays into the fact the game is miniatures agnostic. Because so few rules of the world are set in stone, you can pick whichever miniatures and props you want to play out the adventures. You could go for a classic medieval style, give everything an anime vibe, or even reskin everything so you can use the stuff from your collection of sci-fi miniatures and terrain. The game itself is also incredibly streamlined and intuitive, with simple yet comprehensive rules for creating a ranger and a team of followers that you will guide through a series of linked adventures forming campaigns. You will have to investigate villages and forests, battle through swamps, and face countless foes on the battlefield, with the game randomly generating events and threats for you to overcome, and fielding a vast array of enemies that react to you through the use of an AI system. As you continue your adventures, your ranger becomes more powerful and develops new skills, and you write your own legend, celebrating your successes and carrying the scars of your failures as your character picks up permanent injuries or your followers are slowly whittled away by the enemy. The game is a huge amount of fun, but it's almost as enjoyable just prepping for each new adventure. While it's more than possible to play the adventures using cardboard counters and hand-drawn maps for boards, it's possible to derive immense pleasure from sourcing miniatures, painting them up, and then creating all kinds of terrain. Does your next encounter take place on the banks of a raging river? I guess it's time to crack out your craft knife and glue and start making that river. I have quite a lot of content for Rangers of Shadowdeep on the channel already, with more to come, so I'll leave it there for now. Like an unfortunate ranger, we have a lot of ground still to cover. Number 9, Lords of Waterdeep. Hey look, a worker placement game. I've actually owned quite a few different worker placement games over the years, but it's a genre that doesn't really speak to me, and as I don't like to let my collection of board games grow out of control, they often end up rehomed after a few plays to make space. But Lords of Waterdeep is a keeper. I think this game is a masterpiece really. It's beautiful, with an interesting well-integrated theme, and one of the most elegant rule sets you're ever likely to read. This is a game you can teach to people in seconds. After one turn they will know exactly what they are doing. From that point on, the rules come so naturally, everybody can focus on strategy instead. That to me is one of the true signs of exceptional design. When you aren't playing the rules, you're playing the game. The concept is simple. Each player is one of the lords of the city of Waterdeep, and they want money, power and influence. They have a number of workers at their disposal, which they position around the city to gather resources. These resources are most commonly heroes, which the lords then send on quests to earn victory points and other bonuses. A player's turn is no more complicated than placing one worker on one space, gathering any rewards from that space, and then electing to complete one of their available quests if they now have the resources to do so. It's beautifully simple, and yet so engaging. You are constantly watching your opponents, trying to figure out what resources they might need, and hoping on hope they won't place their worker on the spot you need. There are a few little twists to contend with as well. It's possible to gain access to intrigue cards, which often allow you to directly attack other players, forcing them to complete inconsequential side quests or stealing resources from them. Furthermore, there is a hidden identity element, as each player is secretly allocated a lord with a special objective that garners additional victory points at the end of the game. Perhaps your lord will gain additional victory points for adding buildings to the city, or maybe they will gain a bonus for every quest they complete requiring piety. This game has never failed to delight when I've introduced it to new people. For me, it's the perfect example of what a worker placement game should be. A game that never feels like work. Number 8, Dungeons and Dragons. I bet you thought we were going to get through the whole list without a true role-playing game, but here it is, D&D. I know it's not cool to like Dungeons and Dragons, especially not 5th edition, but if I cared about being cool, I wouldn't be running a channel about board games. All I care about is having fun, and that's what D&D is. Always, without fail, fun. I don't actually play a lot of true role-playing games, and I only really started playing D&D a few years ago, and I am sure most people watching this will have a list as long as their arm of RPGs that they consider to be better than Dungeons & Dragons. But D&D is where I started, and I quickly fell in love with it. I am a writer, a storyteller, so of course something so deeply rooted in storytelling would speak to me. I took on the role of Dungeon Master for a group of friends who wanted to give D&D a try, and I don't think any of us expected to enjoy it as much as we did. But something almost magical happened as we progressed through our campaign. We forged a story together, the story of a group of misfit heroes who took on a dragon and kind of almost won sort of, as long as you don't think about all the horrific things that went wrong. And as we forged that story, we forged new bonds of friendship that mean the world to me. I have a small number of friends. The 3 who came with me in search of the lost mine of Phandelver rank among the best of them. They have helped me through tough times, almost always when they didn't even know they were doing it, and they have helped me to realise that you never really know a person until you've pretended to be a dragon and eaten their cherished kin. So this is a personal message from me to them in case they ever watch this video. Hello puppies. Number 7. Dark Souls. We reached the point in the list where a lot of people start to think I'm a little crazy. Dark Souls from Steamforged Games gets a lot of bad press. A lot of people hate it for a lot of different reasons. I don't care. I love this game, and I don't mean to say all the people who hate it are wrong. I don't mean to say they don't have some valid criticisms. I'm just saying I don't care. One of the most common complaints about Dark Souls is that it takes a long time to play. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. I've never set up a board game planning to speedrun it. If a game takes all evening to play, that's fine, as long as I'm having fun all evening. Like with so many other games that have made it onto this list, Dark Souls has a simple, straightforward set of rules that are easy to pick up yet result in engaging gameplay. The focus is very much on combat, but that combat is fascinating because it revolves around the concept of dynamic movement. Unlike many dungeon crawlers, where you stand next to an enemy and roll dice until one of you falls over, Dark Souls is in a constant state of flux. Often the movements of enemies will push your character or force you to dodge, so with each turn the landscape changes. You need to think 3 moves ahead. And that's before you even get to the boss fights, which are brutally hard, fiendishly inventive, and the most engaging tabletop skirmishes I've ever had the pleasure to take part in. Recently, Steamforged Games announced 2 new starter sets for Dark Souls, which include a revamped rules book. I don't personally think the rules needed reworking. Dark Souls has been a hit with me and a hit with my friends, but I am interested to see the new rules nonetheless, and I hope the changes please those people who have found the game less compelling than I do. I could say more, but I'm still working on a long form review for the game, and I want you all to tune into that when I publish it, so I'm moving on. Number 6. New Warhammer Quest. Yes, all of them. This is me cheating. I am picking 4 distinct games that all play differently, and I'm sticking them all in the same spot on the list. Hey, if Games Workshop is going to call them all Warhammer Quest, I'm going to call them all my number 6. Some of you may call foul, but think of it this way: if I listed all 4 of these titles separately, one after another in my top 10, this top 10 would be pretty boring, and it would have just resulted in the bottom 4 games on the list getting pushed off. So, to the point. The 4 Quest games in question are, of course, Silver Tower, Shadows over Hammerhal, Blackstone Fortress, and Cursed City. All 4 games fall under the banner of Warhammer Quest, but unlike the D&D adventure games, which are entirely compatible with each other and use the same rules, each Warhammer Quest game is a new experience. It's like Games Workshop are using an iterative design process, releasing each new edit of the rules as a finished game as they hone in on something. Not sure what. The bad news is it makes it difficult to port heroes and enemies between the games. The good news is it means you are always getting a new experience when you buy one of these boxed games. Now, I talk about Warhammer Quest a lot on the channel, so much so there's probably nothing I can say here you don't already know. But for the sake of completeness, I'm going to run through why I love each of the new Quest titles and why they all deserve a place on this list. First is Silver Tower. Silver Tower marked the return of Warhammer Quest after a long absence. It draws inspiration from the original 1995 classic, but it's entirely its own thing. And it's beautiful. Incredible art, incredible miniatures, a fascinating theme that works perfectly with the ever-shifting maps you create with those gloriously illustrated room tiles. Superb. But Silver Tower means so much more to me. It was a birthday gift from my family for a birthday I would rather forget. 2 days before that birthday, I experienced a family tragedy. And I broke. I held myself together for my wife and my daughter, but I was broken. It was my daughter's insistence that I open Silver Tower and build the miniatures that helped me through that. As I put together all the little characters, I put myself together too. Hobbies have immense power, and Silver Tower is the proof of that. Shadows over Hammerhal was Games Workshop's next attempt. It's another beautiful production, but the interesting thing is that it was like the flip side of Silver Tower. While Silver Tower had been entirely cooperative, Hammerhal jettisoned cooperative play completely and brought back the role of a games master with maps of pre-generated dungeons. This allowed for a stronger narrative and dungeons with new types of traps and set pieces. Also, Hammerhal's entire campaign took place in a single dungeon beneath a city, and the players were expected to draw their own maps to find their way around. And all of that felt so very much like advanced HeroQuest to me. It was so warm and nostalgic, like revisiting an old childhood friend. Hammerhal also helped me to gain a greater understanding of the Mortal Realms setting, which previously had seemed a little obtuse to me. Then we have Blackstone Fortress. What can I say that hasn't already been said? Blackstone Fortress was Games Workshop's best stab at a sustainable dungeon crawler. It enjoyed incredible support for 2 years with numerous excellent expansions and a consistent stream of additional content in White Dwarf. I really thought they had the formula nailed down. Shows what I know. Apart from its obvious qualities, smooth gameplay, beautiful production, expansive options, there are 2 main reasons Blackstone is so high on this list. 1. When I was a kid, I always wanted Games Workshop to make a sci-fi version of Warhammer Quest. There were games like Advanced Space Crusade and Ultramarines, but I wanted that Quest experience in space. Blackstone Fortress is that experience. And 2. I owe a lot of my modest success on YouTube to Blackstone Fortress. My extensive coverage of the game in the early days of the channel drew in a lot of viewers, many of which stuck around. I wouldn't be making this video today if it wasn't for Blackstone Fortress. And then we get to Cursed City, a game Games Workshop have fumbled so many times it's beyond a joke. Cursed City is actually my favourite of the 4 titles. It's fast, dangerous and beautiful. Much like a vampire, I guess. If Games Workshop had supported Cursed City like Blackstone Fortress, it would easily be the best game in the series. Alas, the original launch was a mess, and the forthcoming expansion feels like a hastily constructed content patch rather than a genuine effort to support the game and its fans. It's a shame. With a steady stream of high-quality X-Backs, Cursed City would be exceptional. As it stands, it's merely a fantastic game, desperately in need of some love and affection. Maybe it's time for Games Workshop's management to get some new blood in. Number 5. HeroQuest. It's HeroQuest. Enough said. Okay, not quite enough said. I am actually putting 2 versions of HeroQuest in this slot on the list. First of all, we need to talk about the classic original edition from MB Games. I received my copy of HeroQuest as a gift from my parents on Christmas morning 1989. It was the first edition. I fell in love with fantasy gaming that morning and never really looked back. That alone is reason enough to put HeroQuest on this list. Then, relatively recently, I decided to buy a beat-up copy of HeroQuest and restore it on the channel. I purchased the 1990 edition, which had a few minor changes compared to the 89 edition, but was pretty much the same game. I've done videos all about that. I proceeded to restore and paint that copy, charting my progress on the channel, and it's now one of my prized possessions. It's the set I never could have dreamed of owning when I was 10 because I didn't have the skill to paint back then, and the series on restoring it helped draw a lot more subscribers to my channel. That makes it important, not just as a game, but as a very important thing. And that alone would be reason enough to put HeroQuest on this list. But then last year Hasbro crowdfunded a new edition of HeroQuest, paying homage to the original in the artwork and design, but also updating a few things and subsequently releasing expansions and brand new content to take the game in new directions. I covered the crowdfunding campaign on the channel and bought a copy at retail as soon as I could. And I'm not going to lie, I don't like the aesthetic as much as the original. It doesn't have the same nostalgia as the original. I don't like the miniatures as much, and I miss the old Hammer vibe that Games Workshop contributed. But it is a better game. Why? Simple really. The original European edition of HeroQuest had a completely different rules set compared to the version released in North America, and for this reissue, Hasbro used the North American rule set. It's a richer, more rewarding, more cooperative, and I guess more grown-up experience than what I grew up with, and while I will always love that original European rule set, I can't argue the rules for this new edition are better. This is the version of the rules I play with now. So there we have it, different versions of the game, so different they feel like different games completely, but they are sharing this spot on the list, which they have both earned for different reasons. What is this video now? A top 15? Number 4, Advanced HeroQuest. The world is awash with dungeon crawlers. Many of them are big and bloated things, crammed with rules and tokens, intricate campaign systems, and rosters of enemies as long as your list of RPGs are better than D&D. None of them, as far as I'm concerned, match Advanced HeroQuest. Advanced HeroQuest is the perfect balance. It has quick, fun exploration rules, intricate skirmish rules that have enough strategy baked into them without becoming overblown and unwieldy, a fantastic economic engine where finding gold feels suitably rewarding and finding a magic sword feels like winning the lottery, a grubby, dirty theme that encapsulates the true feeling of adventuring in dark dungeons in a way no other game can even come close to, and a simple campaign system that holds it all together beautifully and grounds it in a gritty realism that makes you appreciate the murderously mundane nature of day-to-day life as a hero. This is a game where you need to keep your money safe by keeping it with a moneylender, and then you have to write a will so that your friends can withdraw it if you die. This is a game where your wizard has to buy spell components and where your elf can run out of arrows. This is a game where you scrabble in the darkness for a few coins to pay for the food and lodgings that will see you through the night until you can come back and scrabble in the darkness again. As you hunt down Skaven, butchering them for pocket change, you start to feel not so much like heroes as rat catchers, eking out a filthy living in the murk. It has a style all its own, a unique perspective on dungeoneering, a truly miserable, honest approach to life and sudden, horrible, untimely death in the old world. I have a very strange relationship with Advanced HeroQuest. As a child, I didn't understand it. I was disappointed that it didn't have the same flair and colour as HeroQuest. The rules seemed too dense and complicated, and there wasn't enough variety among the heroes and foes, even though I had a copy of HeroQuest I could use the components from. Many years later, I purchased another copy of Advanced HeroQuest, determined to give it the love and attention it never really got when I was a child. But I struggled with it. It felt miserable. I found it difficult to enjoy the way you had to live from hand to mouth, struggling to find even a single weapon with a hint of magic about it. This wasn't grand, sweeping, epic fantasy in a world of magic. This was getting a whooping for chump change and a few rusty blades. I admired the game, I appreciated its aesthetic and design, but I didn't want to play it. So I wrote a review and passed the game on to a new home. And almost immediately, the game began to nibble at the back of my mind, gnawing at me like a pack of rats. I kept thinking about it. Each time I played a dungeon crawler, I wished I was playing Advanced HeroQuest. Each time I sat to learn a new set of dungeon crawling rules, I was always comparing them to Advanced HeroQuest. And so, I got another copy. First I was given a copy by a good friend, and then I bought a near mint copy on eBay. Now I am gradually collecting old Hammer miniatures so I can have a complete period-accurate set of every hero, henchman and hideous horror in the game. I've also got PDF versions of the expansion Terror in the Dark, although I would really like an original copy one day, plus every White Dwarf article for the game. Because I've come to realise, sometimes life is miserable, sometimes life is brief and brutal, sometimes life is a tough slog, but that's why life is so precious. You have to work for it. And that's why Advanced HeroQuest is precious. Number 3, Horrified. This one is probably going to surprise a few people, but what a lot of people may not realise is that if I have one passion that rivals board games, it's horror movies. I adore horror films, particularly gothic horror films, so Horrified really strikes a chord with me. It's the perfect marriage of two of my favourite things. Horrified is a very simple, elegant cooperative game, drawing its inspiration from the classic Universal monster movies. A selection of different horror movie beasties, including Dracula, the Wolfman and the Invisible Man, are rampaging through the town, and you have to stop them. At its heart, the game is a pick-up and delivery game. Your characters have a fixed number of actions and usually a special skill, and they must race around locations collecting different coloured items to defeat the monsters. There is a unique way to beat each monstrous foe. For Dracula, you must find and smash 4 coffins. For Frankenstein's monster and the monster's bride, you must encourage them to meet and fall in love. And for the Wolfman, you must formulate an antidote and use it in combat. As each enemy is unique and you normally face 3 at any one time, each game is different, offering incredible replayability. And the simple yet engaging gameplay makes this suitable for everything from a family games night to a spooky Halloween gathering with friends. I have probably played Horrified more than any other game I own. It's so quick to set up and play, so much fun, and everyone I have introduced it to has enjoyed it. For those reasons, it earns a place on my top 50 list, but it really earns its place here at number 3 for the sheer beauty of the presentation and how the theme is integrated into every aspect. Just look at the box art. The monsters are arrayed on the cover to form a skull, and around the edge are silhouettes of the monsters with familiar motifs worked into the designs, like the full moon forming the Wolfman's eye, or a villager's flaming torch swirling into the white wisps of the bride's hair. When you open the box, you are presented with the introductory monologue from the 1931 movie Frankenstein, first delivered on screen by Van Helsing himself, Edward Van Sloan. As you play the game, innocent villagers arrive at random and you must protect them. Each villager is a famous character from the movies. Even Abbott and Costello make an appearance. Each weapon, each location, each piece of art, it all brings to mind wonderful black and white movie moments. This is a love letter to the Universal Monsters, a joy for board gamers, and a must-have for horror fans. Oh, and a while back Ravensburger released a second Horrified game called American Monsters, with cryptids such as the Sasquatch and Jersey Devil. It was originally only available in America, which made me a bit sad, but I have recently discovered it's now available in the UK, and I will absolutely be getting a copy. Number 2, Space Crusade. Narrowly missing out on the top spot is the most enjoyable sci-fi board game I've ever played, and another game that was a formative part of my childhood. After falling in love with HeroQuest, I saw adverts for Space Crusade and I excitedly ordered it from one of those mail order catalogues. It seemed like an agonisingly long time before that huge slab of game turned up at my house, but boy oh boy was it worth the wait. HeroQuest may have kickstarted my love of fantasy board games, but it was Space Crusade that cemented it. And as much as I love HeroQuest, I love Space Crusade more. Space Crusade is faster, deadlier, and it gives you a squad of Marines to control instead of a single hero. There are no cute little tables and chairs to fight around, but there are hordes of enemies to mow down. This is a true run and gun gaming experience where you have to keep moving, keep your wits about you, and always be careful how you position your team. Anyone who has seen my playthrough with the Ultramarines on the channel will understand why. Space Crusade also leans into Games Workshop's IP in a way that HeroQuest never did. The old Rogue Trader era 40k setting was perfect for this game, and the game does everything in its power to bring that setting to life. Even the rules book is littered with snippets of Voxcom chatter, charting the messy demise of a Space Marine squad that had previously attempted to purge the Xeno menace. As an adult, I feel blessed to have a copy of Space Crusade, and even more blessed to have copies of the Mission Dreadnought and Elder Attack expansions that I never owned as a child. Those 3 boxes sit on a shelf with my 1990 copy of HeroQuest, my original HeroQuest expansions, Advanced HeroQuest, and Advanced Space Crusade. It's a shelf that encapsulates everything my childhood was, my favourite games, my favourite ways to escape the real world for a few hours, and some of the products I always dreamed of one day owning. Not everybody gets to own a shelf like that. Number 1. And here it is, my number 1, the game that stands above all others in my collection. Another game that I played as a child and which carries with it memories of a more innocent time. A classic from Games Workshop stable, one of the original bookshelf games. Can you guess what it is? Dungeon Quest. Dungeon Quest is incredibly silly. You can die on the first turn. You can lose hopelessly through no fault of your own. You can spend 99% of the game winning, only to lose horribly in the last moments. And it is everything I love about board games. An evocative theme, beautiful art and miniatures, streamlined rules, fast gameplay, solo and competitive game modes, and thrilling edge-of-your-seat adventure. There is no other game that puts you through the ringer like Dungeon Quest. There is no other game that will tear you down, chew you up and spit you out one moment, and then flip the game on its head and gift you with an embarrassment of riches the next. This isn't so much a board game as it is a ride. You just hold on and hope for the best. I am very lucky to have both of the expansions for the game. That gives me the catacombs to explore and a lot of characters to pick from. A beautiful collection of old Hammer Citadel miniatures. Those miniatures really are a treasure and add an extra dimension to every game. Dungeon Quest certainly isn't going to be for everybody. Some people will hate how the game can take your legs out from under you as you sprint to victory, but for me, this is what gaming is all about. When you bring your friends together, roll some dice, laugh at each other's misfortune, and create memories. Because that's what every board game should be. Not a hobby, not a pastime, not a collection of cardboard tokens, plastic miniatures and dice, not an investment for the future. It should be a box of memories. The stories you told with the people you love. Any game that can do that, any game that can snatch a moment out of the world and store it neatly for you so you always know where it is and you can open the lid and relive it whenever you need to. Any game that can do that deserves to be someone's number one. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.